welcome back to the Meg and Amy show. Meg, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day and a lot of good stuff going on in my world. How about you?
Oh, I am dressed in lavender to commemorate the inaugural season of the Golden State Valkyries, the Bay Area's new WNBA team, and the first WNBA team to be introduced in 17 years.
Oh my goodness. So I think most of our listeners know that Amy is holding up the sports side of the Meg and Amy show because Meg is not very well informed. So
I heard that you were kind of like a parkour aficionado, though.
well, it is true that I like to do the things that make no sense for me. That is a very common thread. But I really want to understand more about the WNBA. So, have they had any games yet, or like, where is this all
Yes.
happening?
Well, so by the time we release this video, they will be well into their season, I'm sure. But so far, I've attended one game, and it was phenomenal. Just so fun. So
And tell
fantastic.
me about the audience. Like, are people showing up? Do they?
Yeah, it was a full arena.
Oh, that's so
So this
cool.
is they play at the same Chase Center that the Warriors play at, and it was definitely a very different vibe than when I went to the same place for March Madness, where the women's room was really easy to get into.
Ah, yes. This time, not so much, right? A little bit of a
Yeah, well,
line.
so when we went to March Madness, my husband and son had to wait in line for the bathroom. I loved it. At the Valkyries game, not so much. So there were lots and lots of little girls clad in lavender and black, and the lines were longer. But I will take that in stride.
Oh, that gives me joy. Everyone loves women's sports. Love it.
Everyone watches women's sports.
That's true. That is true.
So Meg, now that we're 4 episodes in, we've had a chance to take a look at our existing episodes. Any learnings from what we've done so far?
Well, let's see. I think I'm still focusing very much on grace and not being too judgmental. It's very, very hard to watch yourself. And then the other thing is, I unsurprisingly did not fully appreciate all the steps that were required for pre and post production. So grateful that we have some help from Madison and our Work to Find friends because there's just a lot of things to learn.
There is, yeah. And we had a little debate over what the appropriate replay speed was, right? So
Yes.
Meg is infamous for listening to things at like double time. She's got, her brain can absorb things really fast. So what speed did you find to be optimal for
Yeah, so
replay?
I tend to think at 1.5, it doesn't make the music and the interludes annoying, but also, gets things going. I've definitely read that this is something that's happening. Like we are as a culture getting more inclined to want information quicker, and it's definitely a generational thing. I don't know if you remember, but when I was in high school, the ticker tape on the news was introduced on CNN, and I remember thinking, this is just absurd. I'm gonna have to listen to the person and read the thing, and and now I laugh
I still
at
find it overwhelming.
yeah.
Does that age me? But
So
now
1.5.
1.5.
1.5.
Yeah, and so I strongly disagree. I think it's 1.25. And then we're perfect.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, readers, let us know. Listeners, let us know. We will be super eager to find out what the consensus is on this topic.
All right, Meg, are you ready to sponge?
Oh yeah, we got a big one today, don't
And
we? A
yeah, we
little bit
do. And for those
intense.
who missed what a sponge is, check out episode 1 to learn about sponging. But we are going to sponge with Meg. And so the big doozy of a topic, I believe we were in Paris just
I think you're supposed to do a little hair flip with the
we
we
were
were in
in
Paris. Yes.
Paris,
Yeah.
and you completely ambushed me on the sidewalk with some of your big ideas about business model shifts. And here I was thinking that you were just gazing at Paris fashion. And no. And so this is why when people ask me if our trip to Paris and London was for fun or for work, I have trouble answering that question, because traveling with Meg is always work.
All right, and just a little defense, Amy tried to kill me multiple times by walking out into traffic with complete disregard to anybody that was coming our way. So I think it's a little bit turnabout as fair play. I make your brain work in weird ways, and you make me move a lot faster and with a lot more
and I did make you do Pilates in French as well. So.
Exactly. So yes, it is a shared joy. But yes, the topic that has been kind of going around in my brain for a while is the fact that right now is an interesting moment in the world of software. So those of us that build software, those of us that have spent our career in creating products that help business run better, there's a lot that's changing, and I feel like the pieces, the sum is bigger than the pieces, and so I really am eager to talk about this with someone. So.
And I'm someone. So
yes.
Yay. And I've got two thumbs too.
And I have nothing to say about fashion that's actually additive. So.
So there's so much to unpack here. In fact, there were, I don't know how many different articles you sent me. There were a lot. But how about if we start with pricing and how this is signaling a bigger shift in the software business?
Yeah. So I'm not really sure when I got this realization. So I think a lot of people are aware that there's a lot of discussion. How are we going to price AI in our products? Are we going to charge for it? Where and how are we going to charge for it? And then the cost structure underneath AI is different, of course. You tend to get charged based on usage. So that is very different than how the software inputs work in a traditional SaaS story. So this kind of foundational element started getting my brain ticking. And I read a really great foundational article from Jason Cohen. He has a blog called A Smart Bear, and I promise you I don't like it just because of the name. But this was way before the topic of AI pricing, and his point was really about startups and how the price of your product determines your business model, because everything about how you capture revenue informs what your customers expect from you from that software product. So that, I think, was the sort of basis of my point of view, that pricing becomes a proxy for how your business is built, the sort of piece that is the foundation of your business. And so a pricing model change is a proxy indicator for the fact that your entire business model is about to change. And I think that is where I started to have like a series of complicated thoughts to go underneath that.
And just to say, like, that was an oldie but a goodie from Jason Cohen, right? Like that, and something that he's brought up again and again, but something that has stood the test of time. So if pricing shifts when something bigger is happening, help me understand, like, maybe where we've seen this before, where what other shifts have shown this trend.
Yeah, so the one that you and I have lived through together, and I'm sure there's others that I've lived through in other places, but the real obvious one I think that everybody can feel is when we move from on-premise software to SaaS, right? The change was multidimensional, right? So from a customer's point of view, they used to buy the software and run it themselves, and the vendor would get a very high price at the beginning, and then they would have very high margins for the recurring maintenance that they would charge. That sort of, it used to be a traditional 15-18% was charged of maintenance so that you could call support and get updates and all of this. So these were very high margin businesses, and they were businesses that you built that had a fair bit of capital investment to create, and then you could sell them over and over and over again. So they created a very profitable business model. And when we shifted to SaaS, it became really clear. Now, remember, I was working at PeopleSoft and Oracle at the time. These were businesses that had a very, very healthy on-premise business motion. And of course, SAP has some of that as well. And we were competing with Salesforce and eventually Workday, et cetera, that were creating businesses that were built on a foundation of recurring revenue. Mm-hmm. And the promise of the recurring revenue from an investor point of view was, hey, this is very predictable, right? Where when you sold on-premise software, it could be very choppy and would be hard to be predictable. With recurring revenue, you could see very clearly for a pretty good visibility forward how your business was growing and what that was going to mean. It also changed the definition of what the vendor was responsible versus what the customer was responsible for. So you had revenue recognition shifts, you had differences in sales compensation plans because the value that you were selling was a longer term value, a lifetime value with the customer.
It became a lot more fun as a product person to have a much closer relationship with the customer and to see them adopt functionality quicker. That was
and to remove the barrier, right? Because the biggest barrier, I mean, back in the days of PeopleSoft, the biggest enhancement request was, please don't make me take any code updates. So like your entire incentive structure from a customer point of view was leave me alone, which made it very hard to get people to stay current, et cetera. So there was a change in the motion of how you built software, and there was a change in the motion of how you captured revenue and value, and there was a change in the motion of how a customer was able to take advantage of it. But the changes inside the business were really very disruptive. It was very hard for revenue recognition models to adjust. It was very hard for sales compensation plans to adjust. It was very hard for momentum to be built in this new path and this new business.
Because it wasn't just new technology, it was whole new business models so the incumbents then had to completely rethink everything, whereas those that were starting from scratch, they got to start anew. And it wasn't just about that technology, it was the whole thing.
Exactly. And that advantage to new versus incumbent became like a really big lift. It took a long time because it wasn't just a product innovation that needed to get to the customer. It was a transformation of the business itself.
So the thing was that the promise was that there would be more value to customers, et cetera. But was it actually cheaper? Like, I mean, it was more predictable, but was it actually more cost effective for customers, or was it just more profitable ultimately for vendors?
Well, interestingly, it wasn't even necessarily more profitable for vendors because the right. Cost basis was shared. So, it was murky. I would say that I don't think it was intending to be cheaper for customers. I think it was intending to set customers up to be able to respond to other things that were happening that they might want to have a benefit for. And I think that did happen. But I think in terms of, it put a big burden on incumbents to recreate both capability and business model in this new world. And in some cases, you just had to start over and build a second line of business.
So let's switch from the past to now what's happening now. So we had this big shift from on-premise to SaaS, and now we're seeing this shift from SaaS to agentic. And what are the pricing changes that you're seeing as a result of that shift?
Right. So again, I think because agentic, in a similar way that cloud delivery started out, if you look at like Salesforces of the world, the first ones out there, they often had to build their own cloud infrastructure because this was before something like AWS and Azure were mature enough to run the kind of businesses that were needed to be built. And then eventually you could start to get some commercial componentry into your business that could help build velocity and focus for the SaaS vendors. So the cost, and this is my point about the cost structure kind of evolved for SaaS as well because the capital outlay became more distributed. What's happening with AI is actually very different because these frontier models, I think everybody is pretty clear that building them requires the kind of investment that is out of reach for most software vendors. And the capabilities and the innovation cycle is going so fast that the reality is everybody is looking at which components do I bring into my solution, and then how do I make sure that I not only add value over the top of whatever it costs me, but keep current with that. So again, you can think about the fact that the foundational building blocks of your software got more complicated, not just in the number of things that you're managing and keeping track of, but also the pricing of them, because there is no price stability yet. And so far we've been fortunate that the prices have been coming down, but there's no real line of sight that that's going to be predictable. So everybody is required to make adjustments without a stable inputs to price. You can think of this very much like tariffs, right? Like you thought you understood what it costs to build shoes or toys or whatever, and then all of a sudden tariffs were introduced and you're like, whoa, my costs have changed pretty dramatically. Now what does that mean for my business? So that's kind of what we're in the world of software today.
I think one of the articles, one of the frameworks that that you shared with me is worth bringing up here, by Kyle Poyer, and he actually brought it forward last October and then has been writing about it. And he'll be joining us, I think, on an upcoming show, right?
Yes.
So that's cool. And so here he's showing that, a little bit of that on-prem and then subscription, and now we're moving into usage and then work and then success metrics maybe. And so like, we talked about the nice thing about on-prem was that it created a lot of scale. Subscription created a lot of predictability. And then with these later metrics, it's going to create value, but you're starting to have this predictability problem, which I think is pretty huge.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is the expectation that the way that you are going to sell these products is going to have more skin in the game yet again between the vendor and the customer. So if you could think about SaaS giving the vendor more skin in the game on the delivery, right? That if the system was down, it was the vendor's problem, not the IT department's problem. Now we're taking another big leap again with these products where customers are expecting to pay for results or some kind of usage pattern for which they should be able to understand what does it mean for their business? Where is that value that is being created? And is it worth it, right? Are they getting a better return for implementing this particular agentic solution? Or are there traditional ways they would do it, typically human labor, better predictability wise and cost variability wise? So like everybody says, hey, I'm interested and I want to play and I want all the upside, but I want a shared downside to what this might mean.
Yeah, and I was talking to an IT leader a few months ago about agents and so on. And they likened it to giving their teenagers cell phones with a usage plan, and how that was not a good idea.
Yeah, those of us that are old enough
Without a cap.
yeah, to have remembered this. This was like a real recurring narrative. Luckily, my children were born later, but my nieces, absolutely, this was their generation. So any millennial out there will absolutely remember some friend or themselves having this moment where they were, having a great old time texting on their phone. And this is even texting when it was really awkward and not at all from a smartphone, back when you had to have real skills in texting.
Phone, and you had to
like press the thing multiple times to get the right letter, all of that. But still, running through the data plans in those days, with no ability to monitor it. And so there was absolutely a vulnerability for parents of like, hey, this could be running away before I notice that it's a problem.
Yeah. And so phones actually got rid of usage. So do you think we'll get rid of usage?
It's a really good question. I think that the question is going to come, can we stabilize the predictability part so that everybody understands what they're paying for and make sure that they're paying for what they need and not what happens to them accidentally. But I think we have a lot of opportunity for whoopsies here, because the beautiful thing about computers is they do what you tell them, and they do it quickly, and they do it a lot. So I think when you get it wrong, and it could be something very simple, it will be a bigger problem than it might have been otherwise.
So on-premise to SaaS, there were pricing changes that indicated a bigger shift. And now we're seeing the same thing from SaaS to Agentic. Now, do you see these shifts as being kind of the same or fundamentally different?
I think there's things we can learn, but I think they're fundamentally different in the sense that the velocity and the vectors are both bigger. So what I mean by that is it took us much longer to see the pattern and have the pattern impact us in the era of cloud to from on-premise to cloud. We had really it didn't feel like it. It felt urgent, but we really had a decade plus to make that transition. I don't think we have a decade plus to make the transition to AI agentic stories. I think we're getting pressure from all ends to really create value. We're getting pressure to do this quickly and effectively. And it's not just software vendors that are getting pressure. It is business owners being asked, why are you doing things the old-fashioned way and the inefficient way? Why are you not leveraging AI to be better, faster, cheaper, bigger, right? So the pressure on the demand side is bigger. The pressure on the business of software to compete is bigger. And I think that the foundational elements are the supersets of what we've seen in the past, in both the pricing piece as well as the pace for which the definition of what it is you're trying to achieve is really takes a lot to keep up. So I think that creates a lot of tension, all at a time where cost of capital is very murky right now. So majority businesses' cost of capital is high interest rate value. And then, we have these edge cases where, being an AI business, people are willing to bet on it at a kind of a higher capital outlay. But no matter what, the expectations for that are very high. And that feels very much like the dot-com era, where there was just so much going on in one, at the same time, that you could very clearly tell there were going to be winners and losers, but to be sure which one was a winner and which one was a loser was very hard. And the energy of waiting was also too expensive.
Okay, Meg, I'm going to rein you in a little bit here. So you have talked about how when we think about technology shifts are usually about product strategy, like what new things you can do. But today we're also seeing this disruption in how you sell and how you retain and how you build products. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. So when we moved to cloud, we got a byproduct benefit of velocity, like we talked about. Like we could deliver more quickly to customers, but we didn't really get a new market. We were delivering things that we had already thought of in the on-premise world. But today we're seeing this opportunity with AI to come at entirely new ways and new capabilities that we didn't even have line of sight to in the SaaS world. And so this is both really exciting, but also, again, creates a need for us to be thinking more strategically, that in just delivering AI things that do what software did before is not going to unlock that value.
Yeah.
There's going to be people delivering new things with AI that we can't think of today.
I think that what you just said deserves a repeat because it's just such an interesting point. Okay, so you said when we moved to cloud, we got the byproduct benefit to product velocity, but we didn't get new market. That's amazing. So what's an example now of a new market with this business shift? Like how does Agentic open up just totally new markets based on business models and so on that we didn't really get in that previous shift?
Yeah, I think there's one other element that is important in this new market is that we're not just getting new innovation, we're getting it at a cost reduction that we never had before. So we're getting it at very high revenue per employee, very high EBITDA per employee. These new things are just growing at a rate we haven't seen before. So let me give you an example. One of the businesses that's growing very fast is Glean. Most people have probably heard of it. And in the past...
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about OnlyFans.
Well, yes, for sure. OnlyFans wins all of the revenue per employee. And
But
we all
we're not going to
know...
talk about that.
We all know that business model has always won in the era of the internet. But setting that aside, let's talk about Glean, which is more of an enterprise story. So in the past, you and I have lived the world of knowledge management and getting access to critical information where people need it. We've even seen for a long time the idea of chatbots and having some sort of AI agent helping you get access. But everybody recognized that when, OpenAI opened up that like there has to be a better way. Like the AI could be smarter and better and do more summation and less, choose your own adventure, kind of handing you a bunch of links. And so this is really where Glean is kind of coming in to capture and rethinking the idea of knowledge management with the actual value that people are looking for today, which is, hey, let me give you a private LLM that looks only at your data and helps you understand everything that's out there. And what's so interesting about this is, of course, unsurprisingly, it's, doubling customer base very, very quickly in the last year. Its revenue per employee is off the charts compared to what we would see in SaaS. And so the velocity of that value creation is much bigger than the market we would have imagined for knowledge management, because it's really unlocking something bigger than that.
This is kind of amazing, but it also has pretty big implications. So when you start talking about growing revenue at such a big pace, but not growing employee populations, you start to talk about employment numbers and jobs. And so then this gets us into some scary territory. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, what does this mean for
us? Yeah. Do we have a history or a future in this world? I really think that's the right way to think about it. So, a lot of people are like, oh, AI coming for jobs. And I think that's something to think about, and we can talk about that at another time. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying here is the business of software, the jobs that we used to have aren't needed in the same way anymore. And it's not because of AI, it's because the business model doesn't need it anymore. And that has a tremendous amount of nuance underneath it. And it's something that is scary to be sure, but I think it's something that like more people need to fully comprehend so that we can together really understand what is it that the business of software looks like in a world where you have such high revenue per employee and such rapid adoption and value creation. What is it that you need people to do to grow, sustain, and protect that business? Because I am very clear it's not what we used to have to do.
Yeah. And so you talk a lot about like unlearning. So like what do people need to unlearn?
So I think first we need to really understand better the components of how the business that we're in today, whatever our jobs are, whatever our business is, we need to truly understand how it makes money. So that when we start hearing in our own product portfolios how things are going to be added, we will have a better clarity of how that new set of revenue streams are going to impact. And if we're starting at a business that is AI only, we need to really recognize that there are a very different kind of business model underneath. So most of us don't fully understand all of the pieces of how our business makes money. Most of us spend our time in our area of specialty, right? And so if we know that in the future our area of specialty is probably not that special anymore, it would be useful to have put some energy into where are the emerging needs going to happen. So to me, the unlearning is the belief that your specialty is special. You have to let that go. As difficult and as painful as that is, you have to say what's special is the fact that I learned how to do something in one business model, and now I'm going to learn how to do it in a different business model. And to be fair, I'm probably going to have to define what that new business model needs, because it's probably going to come on us so fast we're not going to know. There's not going to be a playbook for it.
Yeah. Okay. So let me restate something that you said. So you had said this is not just about AI coming for your job. So it's not just trying to like protect your job against AI. It's really the fact that the new business model does not need your job anymore.
That's right.
But the business model needs stuff. It needs outcomes. It needs work. It needs to make money. It needs,
retain customers. Yes.
So taking a step back and looking at, all right, well, what are the jobs to be done? What are the component parts that make up that business model, and kind of mapping my special gifts to that is really where you can thrive.
And so this is where, again, it just gets back to my core belief that we need to invent the future, because no one's going to figure this out for us. So while it's terrifying to think that all of this expertise, like a good percentage of it is not useful, and certainly the way I do my work is no longer going to be the way I do it in the future. But to recognize that all of that experience is very helpful for me to get back to first principles to figure out what does this new business model need and when does it need it. It doesn't need everything to change day one. So by thinking about it now, we get ourselves mentally prepared, we get ourselves emotionally and cognitively prepared to ask the questions of what is needed in this new motion, in this new momentum that everybody is looking to capture.
Do you have any last tips or kind of practical advice on how people can get started on inventing this future? Which, by the way, it sounds like a tagline, but this is just showing your truly optimistic colors shine through. You really do mean it. So I just want everybody to know that. Any practical advice?
Yeah. So again, I think spending time understanding why you do what you do in your job today is a really good use of time. A lot of us go through the motions and kind of work on muscle memory. And I just believe your past muscle memory of doing the same thing over and over again isn't as helpful as getting really clear and doing a bit of an inventory. And this is going to sound trite and recursive, but the thing that AI is good at is breaking concepts down and making it easier for you. There's never been a better time to ask that stupid question. So what are all the things that make up EBITDA, and what would that look like in a business that I work in? And what is the competitive landscape for my business? Like, you can have a tutor that helps you with that. And I think now is the time to get really curious, because you're going to be able to use that learning to help figure out where are the value drivers in the future and where are the opportunities.
But on the other hand, Meg might be wrong, right?
God, yes.
Maybe all the jobs will stay the same.
Maybe. Or maybe this will take a really long time because we'll find that none of it works and we have collapse of our AI models.
And maybe AI is just like a little blip, like NFTs.
Right.
It'll just go away.
Exactly. Could happen. It totally could happen.
So, shall we switch to Leadership Corner?
I think everybody's praying we do that soon.
So, our question for this episode is, my budget has been cut every year for the last 2 years. I've never heard that before. And I feel like I'm letting my team down because we can't add any resources. What do I do?
Wow, that is exactly tied to this topic.
Yeah.
I think you should start on this one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, first you cry into your pillow. Maybe do a crossword and then cry again. That's what I would do. Well, I think that, first of all, you have to be really clear about priorities and what you can and you can't do. So it is a nice opportunity to employ the word no and to get really ruthless in terms of prioritization. So when you have all the resources in the world, you can, it's really easy to not prioritize. And that's not good, actually. So you actually want to have constraints, and even though it doesn't sound like it. And then you need to start getting crafty as well in terms of being able to get more productive, be able to use AI tools, etc. Find ways where you can, suddenly 10x your own business model and figure out ways to make your folks' energy go further. But I'm sure Meg will have even better.
A few additional ads. So I think about this a lot because the reality is this is going to be more common than not. That if you just do the logic of revenue and profit per employee, the high value, high functioning companies are going to have smaller staff. And so to me, there's two things, and I think you hit the what to work on piece really well. I would add one other thing. We need to collectively, and you should start this with your own team, redefine how people see progression in a world where progression is not how many people you have, and redefine what is an achievement, right? So oftentimes we use size of org as a proxy for experience and expertise. But to me, in this new world, that's completely upside down. If it takes you 100 people to build a cool tool and it takes me 5, I should be much more valuable as a leader than you. And again, teaching your team that is where the value for them and the career benefit for them is capturing that momentum and showing that you can 10x your own group and your own way of doing work. So I'm a big fan of the Patty Azzarello belief, do less with less, don't do more, don't try to do the same when you have less resources, but figure out where you get the biggest levers for value and figure out how you can celebrate progress that isn't tied to headcount addition in your team, because it's oftentimes the psychological bit that is the hardest to manage versus the actual workload. But people confuse the two and often will talk about workload when they really mean, I feel like you're diminishing my role because I don't have as many direct reports.
All right. It's official. Next time you go first and I will say ditto. All right, Meg. So we are going to wrap up this episode. But before we do, what did we learn? What are some of the key takeaways? So first of all, me saying ditto, that is one of them. One of the things that I jotted down when we were talking was that when we went from on-premise to SaaS, there was more skin in the game in terms of the vendor-customer relationship. And now with Agentic, that's like on steroids, right? Like that there's even more skin in the game because we're going to be paying for results, whether those results are, work delivered or success metrics or what have you, but having a really, really tight relationship between vendor and customer, I think is big. And then the other thing that I took away was that we need to stop talking about AI taking jobs and about AI changing business models and how we respond personally and as leaders to that change.
Yeah, so obviously I've had a lot more runway with this thought experiment, but I don't think it's been helpful. I think it's only just caused my brain to short circuit in more directions. I think in addition to your summary, I think this is a moment to be paying attention to what business you're in and what job you do. The more that you truly understand what you do today and what the business is leveraging you for, as you start to see change, you'll be able to adapt and adjust. And the change for you will be ongoing and less dramatic. I think if we don't use this runway that we have, there's going to be a lot of people that are just shell-shocked afterwards when they're like, what do you mean my job is no more? And I don't want that. Again, in this Invent the Future, I want us to create even more interesting jobs, and I want us to have a say in what that looks like. And so I'm really hopeful that together we see these trends and we figure it out so that we can prepare ourselves. And that's really what I think it's all about.
All right, everyone, in upcoming episodes, we'll be talking about AI taking jobs.
we need to have a more uplifting topic, I think.
Oh, I know. How about engagement? We'll talk about Gallup's recent engagement survey.
There you go.
And we're going to be welcoming guest Dave Liu, founder and managing partner of Hyphen Capital and co-founder of the Asian Leadership Center. Again, in upcoming episodes at some point, we will be bringing in all of these topics and guests. A reminder for everyone to send in your questions for the Leadership Corner. And also, please subscribe and spread the word on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you everyone who's been so supportive as we get our legs under us. I really do believe in us. So let's invent the future together.
And make every day count. Bye.
Bye.